Hi, welcome back to the final session on how to increase your revenue. This is part 4 of a 4-part series. Today, we're going to be talking about the last tip, which is if you're trying to increase your revenue, obviously just simply increase your price. Sounds very straightforward, but there's a very scientific way on how to find and determine your optimal price. So let's look into that. First thing to notice is as you move around your price, two things will adjust as well. Number one is customer acquisition costs, so that's CAC. As your product or service becomes more expensive, it'll become harder for you to get customers because customers need more time to decide. You might have to spend more money marketing to them. You might have to actually hire salespeople to convince them. So all of this goes into the cost. The second thing that will happen is churn will follow. The more expensive your product is, the more likely people are to switch away to another provider or just to simply stop using it because it's too expensive. So as churn moves around, lifetime value also is affected. So that's LTV. So the key thing to notice is CAC and LTV, because when churn moves around, as you increase price, LTV will go up as well, but churn goes up, so LTV tends to go down as well. So you want to see on a higher level, what is it doing to your customer LTV? So I'll give you an example. So this lady over here is Dr. Alexandra Greenhill. She's a Vancouver-based entrepreneur. She runs this company called My Best Helper. They are like Airbnb, but they match parents with babysitters. So when they started out their platform, they actually charge babysitters $10 a month to be on the platform. They found that babysitters would stay for an average of about 6 months, and that was pretty much fixed because being a babysitter is a temporary job, it's not a permanent job. And at $10 a month, 6 months, lifetime value is $60, right? 10 times 6, $60. They actually ended up increasing their price all the way up to $80, which is an 8x increase. So at $80, they found that churn was doubled. Their babysitters only stayed on the platform for an average of 3 months now instead of 6 months. But at $80 a month times 3 months, your overall lifetime value for your customer is $240. So that's 4 times higher than $60. So at the end of the day, that's still much better profit per customer after the change, despite having much higher churn. So that's one idea around paying attention to how LTV moves around. They found that $80 was kind of the sweet spot because any higher than that, it became too difficult to actually acquire customers. So I'll actually dive into an example here so you can see what is the optimal pricing. So you can do something like this on your own. You basically start to measure the changes based on the changes in your price. So you play around with different pricing, and then you actually chart on the same graph what is the LTV for your customer. So for example, at $1, maybe your customer stays for 6 months, right? At $2 a month, maybe they still stay at 6 months. And then you have different times. So let's say at $15, maybe your customer only stays for 1 month, right? So you have different LTV. And then you have cost of acquisition. So here, when you try to measure cost of acquisition, you're trying your best to measure and capture everything. So all your marketing spend, your ad spend, you try to encompass time and salaries that go towards that as well. So you try your best to quantify that based on the number of customers over a cohort. And let's say, for example, you estimate over here at $1 for your product, customer stays for 6 months, lifetime value is $6, customer acquisition costs you $2 to get one customer. So sounds great because your LTV is still higher than your CAC. For every customer, it costs you $2 to get them, but you're getting $6 out of them, right? But as you start to plot this out, you will notice over here, you'll have this thing called LTV versus cost of acquisition ratio. How this is calculated is basically you take your lifetime value and you divide that by your cost of acquisition. The higher the number, the better. So if you see over here at $15 for the product or service, if the customer only stays for 1 month, your lifetime value from the customer is $15. And let's say assuming cost of acquisition is just the same amount, then basically your LTV CAC ratio is 1. So the lower the number, the worse it is. The higher the number, the better. So over here you can see, let's say $5 a month for your product or service. LTV, assuming it's 5 months. So we have $25 for your customer, and your CAC, customer acquisition cost, is $4. Not too high. So you can see good ratio here, big difference between LTV and CAC. So that's how you try to plot and find what is the kind of best price. So as you do this on a graph, you're looking at the yellow one, which is LTV CAC ratio, and you want to try to find the highest point. Make sense? Cool. So the second question I typically get around pricing is, how do I figure out what my initial price is? So there are 2 common ways of doing it. Number 1 is cost-based pricing. Number 2 is value-based pricing. I'm not really a fan of cost-based pricing. Cost-based pricing includes things like, number of people you have to put towards a project, amount of time that goes into it, what resources you put into building your product, and that kind of stuff. value-based project actually gets you to think about how you're adding value to your customer, and it allows you to price around that. So some examples of value-based pricing include, number one, if you can help your customer increase their revenue, then you can try to charge some percentage of that. And a good percentage to try to aim for is maybe about 10 to 25% of their annual additional monthly income. The second thing you can possibly do is if your solution is helping your customers save some money, then you can aim to actually charge them a percentage of that again. So you can try to aim to charge them maybe 10 to 15% of their annual savings, right? You can possibly even charge more if you know that this savings is a long-time savings. And third way of value add is time save. If your product is a convenient product that actually helps them eliminate a manual process, automate it, and help them save a lot of time, then you want to try to capture some of that value as well. So this is a bit trickier. What you want to try to do there is, number one, you want to try to identify what their time is worth. So if you know that, let's say, on a high level estimate, your customer's time is worth $150 per hour. And if you know that you're saving them $20 per hour, then again, based on that, you can try to charge them a small percentage from there. So maybe you can try to charge them 10% of that. If you can't quantify what your time is worth, another way of viewing it is very similar to increased revenue. Try to identify what missed opportunities they're losing out on because they have to spend the time solving this problem. So if they have to do something manually, it's not automated, they're actually wasting a lot of time. Maybe they can't get new customers. Maybe they can't service existing projects. So you can, again, try to charge them maybe like 10% of what this missed opportunity cost is. So try play around with some of these numbers and just start to think about what value are you adding for your customer. I'll give you some real life examples so you can kind of understand how it really drastically changes the way your business will scale. So I work with this recycling company. I won't name the names for privacy reasons, but basically when they started, they were actually helping big events like music festivals. And basically what they would do is these big events would actually come to them and say, hey, we want to have recycling bins throughout our venue so that our attendees can actually recycle. And how they would service those is they would set those bins there and they would hire volunteers to actually manage those bins. And what they did is initially when they priced all around costs. So they would say, oh, it's a 3-hour event, it's a 100% event. Therefore, because it's 3 hours, 100%, maybe we need 5 bins, we need 3 volunteers, it's going to be X amount of dollars. And then they would have another client come to them and say, oh, you know what? Our event is also 3 hours long, but maybe it's 500 people. And they would calculate all of that and they say, okay, based on that, because it's still about 3 hours, we only need about maybe double the amount of volunteers to manage that. So it's maybe 6 volunteers and we would charge Y for this. And they found that by charging based on costs, it wasn't proportionate to the scale of the event and they couldn't scale their business as well. So when I started to look at their financials and I realized this was how they were charging, I said, hey, why don't you actually charge based on the number of attendees for an event? And as you do something like that, you're basically working off the success of your client. As your customer becomes more successful, you also share in their success, right? So they ended up moving that and that actually made the nonprofit a lot more profitable. Another example and idea is this other consulting company where this lady, she was a consultant that did a lot of speaking engagements. And what she did is she would do some of the workshops and she would charge her workshops based on number of attendees. So if a company says, hey, we want to have you come in and speak to our employees, we have a room of about 50 people, then she'll say, oh, it's this amount of dollars. And one day she finally got a big client. Her client was actually EA Games. And she noticed that, oh, you know what? Charging based on number of employees is not the same because now I'm actually securing a much larger client. They have a much larger budget for this type of speaking engagements. Why am I still charging based on number of attendees? So again, we went back to the drawing board and we talked about how can we explore charging based on value? So what is the value you're adding to this larger company? How are you helping them? Because they're larger, they're probably benefiting more from whatever service or consulting advice she's giving as well. So think about how can you add value versus just purely price based on cost. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have any questions, if you're interested, check out my YouTube channel. This is the last part. You can follow the rest of the series under the Daily Sales Tips playlist. Here's my email, chin@classynovel.com. And if you look me up on YouTube, it's just Chang Chin Hing, CHANG, CHINHING. All right, enjoy your day.